Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for joining us this evening for a lecture with Timothy Morton in celebration of their new book, Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology from Columbia University Press. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Meredith Lehman, and I'm the head of education here at the Kemper. Can you all hear me okay? Is it good? All right, great. So tonight's lecture is the culminating event in Ecology Now, Art and Humanities in the Anthropocene, a series of public programs that explore the environment through the lenses of visual art, religion, public health, and cultural studies. I can't think of a better way to conclude the series than a scholar whose multidisciplinary practice engages all of these areas and more, and whose philosophical writing has informed the thinking of many contemporary visual artists and their formal and conceptual approaches to the environmental concerns of our time. The talk is organized in coordination with the installation in our atrium by Madrid-based artist Santiago Sierra, titled 52 Canvases Exposed to Mexico City's Air. The artist made the 52 compositions by placing adhesive lacquered canvases on the floor of a building in Mexico City with the windows open, allowing the air to settle on them. Each week for a year, he removed one canvas, before having a conservator permanently fix the sediment that had gathered on its surface. The result is a disturbing time lapse of noxious accumulation. With this large-scale installation, Sierra invites us to grapple with the magnitude of the climate crisis, and both its abstract effects and more tactile dimensions, something that Timothy Morton describes as a hyperobject, objects that are massively distributed in time and space relative to humans, and that compel us to think and coexist differently. Hyperobjects are not only objects that may instill fear and anxiety, they can also be global-scale social movements that inspire action and change, like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and international student-led anti-colonial and anti-capitalist resistance. Tonight, as we gather in a public space on unceded native land, surrounded by fences raised to suppress these mobilizations, I find hope in Morton's insistence that we are all connected to each other and that with understanding comes responsibility. As they write in Hell, quote, "How we treat each other is how we treat the biosphere." So following the talk and a Q&A with you in the audience, we'll have time for a book signing. The book's just arrived hot off the press. So if you haven't had time to purchase the book, you can do so tonight in our gift shop. And Tim will be doing some signings for us. And there'll also be time to view the Sierra installation if you haven't had a chance to see that yet, or if you want to revisit it after our wonderful talk this evening. So before I turn it over to Chris Shea, the Director of Public Scholarship, to introduce our speaker, I want to thank our co-sponsor, WashU's Program in Public Scholarship, who made tonight's event possible, who brought Tim to St. Louis, as well as our members who made this event and other events free and open to the public. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Meredith, and thanks everyone for being here. I want to thank the wonderful staff at the Kemper for their help organizing this event, as well as the support of my team, especially Liz Wolfson, Julie Rivenes, Jeremy Goldmeyer, and Kylan Williams. I also want to thank the Center for the Humanities, and finally Dean Hu and his office for supporting this event. A little over 20 years ago, I was applying to PhD programs and was looking for places that housed the most dynamic environmental criticism. I had settled on the University of California at Davis, where the beat poet and environmental writer Gary Snyder had helped set up an innovative interdisciplinary program called Nature and Culture. It was exactly this collision that interested me. But I got to Davis only to find that Gary Snyder had just retired. Taking Snyder's spot on the Davis faculty would be a newly hired scholar named Timothy Morton. I did not know much about this Professor Morton, only that they had published a book punningly called The Poetics of Spice, as well as an earlier book on the poet Percy Shelley, which apparently Jacques Derrida had called magnifique. Otherwise, Morton was a cipher. Remember, these were earlier days of the internet, before it was so easy to develop an online platform and have your university keep your academic bio fresh. Everyone's updated their bios recently, right? It's part of my job here. Taking seminars with Timothy Morton, watching the path-breaking book, Ecology Without Nature, come together, seeing the glimmers of their next books, The Ecological Thought and Hyperobjects. These projects profoundly influenced my own writings on air travel, and meanwhile, Morton's interlocking theories were profoundly shaping and expanding the field of environmental humanities at large. As I got to know Tim and take part in their ever-unspooling projects, one thing that always surprised and impressed me was how they would be open to unplanned collaborations and creative suggestions for new directions. Their graduate seminars and office hours were true incubators of novel ideas. Dissertation meetings would fly off the wall and send one's project hurtling into uncharted territory. Teaching for Tim was always thrillingly experimental. From Davis, Morton moved on to Rice University, where they are housed currently, and has gone on to collaborate with artists and creative souls, including Bjork, Olafur Eliasson, DJ Spooky, Laurie Anderson, Jeff Bridges, and many, many others. Their collaborations, sometimes sought out, occasionally spontaneous, have turned Timothy Morton into a prime example of a public scholar, a thinker and researcher who lets their ideas move across wide, often unanticipated audiences, and then go to these audiences to meet people there, to take the ideas further, and in the words of one of my favorite philosophy professors, to make it real. Morton is here with us today for what is officially the first launch event to celebrate the publication of their brand new book, Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology. Please join me in welcoming Timothy Morton.
Gosh, well, goodness gracious me, thank you very much. I would like to first of all just say let's have another hand for Meredith and Chris here for doing such a beautiful job with everything. I've known Chris for a very long time. He's the most wonderful person, incredible scholar, amazing intellectual, and I'm so fortunate that he's part of hosting this, and very touched that you have me out here. I have to enter a password in order to see the screen here. I have a presentation over there, but unfortunately I'm a bit rubbish. And I don't know what my slides are. Thank you for laughing about that. Oh, lovely. Great, thank you. That's great. So hello everybody. Hi. You know what? I'm really nervous. I'm really nervous to do this. I haven't been nervous like this since I did this hyperobjects book, and actually probably the very first big lecture that I did about hyperobjects was at Chris's behest at Loyola in New Orleans, and loads of people were there, and I was equally really scared. This particular lecture is called "This Is Hell." It's not the end of the world. Thank you for almost laughing. And I'm actually, because I'm nervous, I'm going to read something. There's like a 10-page epigraph to this by Thomas Morton. And it's from 1962. And I'm just going to open my water here. It's called The Moral Theology of the Devil. I changed the pronouns, hopefully. Change them all. The devil has a whole system of theology and philosophy which will explain to anyone who will listen that created things are evil, that people are evil, that God created evil, and that he already directly wills that people should suffer evil. According to the devil, God rejoices in the suffering of people, and in fact, the whole universe is full of misery because God has willed and planned it that way. Indeed, says this system of theology, God the Father took real pleasure in delivering his Son to his murderers, and God the Son came to earth because he wanted to be punished by the Father. Because he wanted to be punished by the Father. Both of them together seek nothing more than to punish and persecute their faithful ones. As a matter of fact, in creating the world, God had clearly in mind that people would inevitably sin, and it was almost as if the world were created in order that people might sin, so that God would have an opportunity to manifest his justice. So, according to the devil, the first thing created was really hell. As if everything else were, in some sense, for the sake of hell. Therefore, the devotional life of those who are faithful to this kind of theology consists above all in an obsession with evil. As if there were not already enough evils in the world, they multiply prohibitions and make new rules, binding everything with thorns, so that people may not escape evil and punishment. For they would have him bleed till morning till night, though even with so much blood there is no remission of sin. The cross, then, is no longer a sign of mercy, for mercy has no place in such a theology. It's the sign that law and justice have utterly triumphed. As if Christ had said, I came not to destroy the law, but to be destroyed by it. For this, according to the devil, is the only way in which the law could really and truly be fulfilled. Not love, but punishment is the fulfillment of the law. The law must devour everything, even God. Such is this theology of punishment, hatred, and revenge. They who would live by such a dogma must rejoice in punishment. They may indeed successfully evade punishment themselves by playing ball with the law and the lawgiver, but they must take good care that others do not avoid suffering. They must occupy their minds with their present and future punishment. The law must triumph. There must be no mercy. This is the chief mark of the theology of hell, for in hell there is everything but mercy. That is why God himself is absent from hell. Mercy is the manifestation of his presence. The theology of the devil is for those who, for one reason or another, whether because they are perfect or because they have come to an agreement with the law, no longer need any mercy. With them, O grim joy, God is satisfied. So too is the devil. It's quite an achievement to please everybody. The people who listen to this sort of thing and absorb it and enjoy it develop a notion of the spiritual life which is a kind of hypnosis of evil. A kind of hypnosis of evil. The concepts of sin, suffering, damnation, punishment, the justice of God, retribution, the end of the world, and so on, are things over which they smack their lips with unspeakable pleasure. Perhaps this is because they derive a deep, subconscious comfort from the thought that many other people will fall into the hell which they themselves are going to escape. And how do they know that they're going to escape it? They cannot give any definite reason except for the fact that they feel a certain sense of relief at the thought that all this punishment is prepared for practically everyone but themselves. This feeling of complacency is what they refer to as faith, and it constitutes a kind of conviction that they are saved. He wrote this in 1962, does it remind you? It's 2020. What is it? The devil makes many disciples by preaching against sin. He convinces them of the great evil of sin, induces a crisis of guilt by which God is satisfied, and after that he lets them spend the rest of their lives meditating on the intense sinfulness and of evident reprobation of other men. The moral theology of the devil starts out with the principle of other people. Forgive me, I've been changing the pronouns and changing the men in this to people, but I've been screwing up. The moral theology of the devil starts out with the principle, pleasure is sin. Then he goes to work it the other way. All sin is pleasure. After that, he points out that pleasure is practically unavoidable and that we have a natural tendency to do things that please us, from which he reasons that all our natural tendencies are evil and that our nature is evil in itself. And he leads us to the conclusion that no one can possibly avoid sin since pleasure is inescapable. After that, to make sure that no one will try to escape or avoid sin, he adds what is unavoidable cannot be a sin. Then the whole concept of sin is thrown out the window as irrelevant. and people decide that there is nothing left except to live for pleasure, and in that way, pleasures that are naturally good become evil by deordination, and lives are thrown away in unhappiness and sin. It sometimes happens that people who preach most vehemently about evil and the punishment of evil, so that they seem to have practically nothing else on their minds except sin, are really unconscious haters of other people. They think the world doesn't appreciate them, and this is their way of getting even. He wrote this in 1962. The devil is not afraid to preach the will of God, provided he can preach it in his own way. The argument goes something like this. God wills you to do what is right, but you have an interior attraction which tells you by a nice warm glow of satisfaction what is right. Therefore, if others try to interfere and make you do something that doesn't produce this comfortable sense of interior satisfaction, quote scripture, tell them that you ought to obey God rather than men, and then go ahead and do your own will, do the thing that gives you that nice warm glow. The theology of the devil is really not theology, but magic. Faith in this theology is really not the acceptance of a God who reveals himself as mercy. It is a psychological, subjective force which applies a kind of violence to reality in order to change it according to one's own whims. Faith is a kind of super-effective wishing, a mastery that comes from a special, mysteriously dynamic willpower that is generated by profound convictions. By virtue of this wonderful energy, one can exert a persuasive force even on God himself and bend his will to one's own will. By this astounding new dynamic, soul force of faith, which any quack can develop in you for an appropriate remuneration, you can turn God into a means to your own ends. We become civilized medicine men, and God becomes our servant. Though he is terrible in his own right, he respects our sorcery. He allows himself to be tamed by it. He will appreciate our dynamism and will reward it with success in everything we attempt. We will become popular because we have faith. We will be rich because we have faith. All our national enemies will come and lay down their arms at our feet because we have faith. Business will boom all over the world, and we will be able to make money out of everything and everyone under the sun because of the charmed life we lead. We have faith. But there is a subtle dialectic in all this too. We hear that faith does everything. So we close our eyes and strain a bit to generate some soul force. We believe. We believe. Nothing happens. We close our eyes again and generate some more soul force. The devil likes us to generate soul force. He helps us to generate plenty of it. We are just gushing with soul force, but nothing happens. So we go on with this until we become disgusted with the whole business. We get tired of generating soul force. We get tired of this faith that doesn't do anything to change reality. It doesn't take away our anxieties, our conflicts. It leaves us a prey to uncertainty. It doesn't lift all responsibilities off our shoulders. Its magic is not so effective after all. It doesn't thoroughly convince us that God is satisfied with us, or even that we are satisfied with ourselves, though in this, it is true, some people's faith is quite effective. Having become disgusted with faith, and therefore with God, we are now ready for the totalitarian mass movement that will pick us up on the rebound and make us happy with war. 1962. And make us happy with war, with the persecution of inferior races or of enemy classes, or generally speaking, with actively punishing someone who is different from ourselves. Another characteristic of the devil's moral theology is the exaggeration of all distinctions between this and that, good and evil, right and wrong. These distinctions become irreducible divisions. No longer is there any sense that we might perhaps all be more or less at fault and that we might be expected to take upon our own shoulders the wrongs of others by forgiveness, acceptance, patient understanding and love, and thus help one another to find the truth. On the contrary, in the devil's theology, the important thing is to be absolutely right and to prove that everybody else is absolutely wrong. This doesn't exactly make for peace and unity among people because it means that everybody wants to be absolutely right themselves or to attach themselves to another who is absolutely right. And in order to prove their rightness, they have to punish and eliminate those who are wrong. Those who are wrong, in turn, convinced that they are right, etc. Finally, as might be expected, the moral theology of the devil grants an altogether unusual amount of importance to the devil. Indeed, one soon comes to find out that he is at the very center of the whole system, that he is behind everything, that he is moving everybody in the world except ourselves, that he is out to get even with us, and that there is every chance of his doing so because it now appears his power is equal to that of God, or perhaps even superior to it. In one word, the theology of the devil is purely and simply that the devil is God. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Sorry, David. So the frontispiece to this book is by a new friend of mine called David Durrell, and he started this group called Mars in the late 80s that made this tune called Pump Up the Volume, which you might know. And in order to get permission for this image, I had to find out how to get in touch with him. And I wrote him this note. He's like, "Oh my, are you Timothy Morton?" Like, "Yeah." "Oh." And so then we just started sort of loving on each other. And it was amazing for me because I used to go to the club that he started called Love, of which the frontispiece is the flyer. Long story short, he's a DJ, and he wouldn't have liked what I just did, which is just stop this tune. Thank you for laughing. It's very good for my ego. Yes, I can keep going. I have to have my glasses on now because I can't see. And, you know, so I started this Facebook page called Christian Ecology to start promoting this book because I don't have an agent, right? Everything I do is like sort of homegrown, organic stuff, right? And so it's all done out of love. And it's another reason why I'm very grateful to Chris and Meredith and everybody for helping me out with this, because it's only because of nice, lovely people who want me to come and talk to them or even indeed publish books that I do anything in this thing called life, which I've just been referring to. You know, so I started this Facebook page, and the first reaction actually was "fuck off, N-word," because they assumed something about the author of this page, you know. And then the next few reactions were the angry face, you know, angry face. And then quite a few reactions, maybe about 500 since then, have been like the ridicule laughing face. So I get the angry face and the ridicule face and a lot of like stuff, not just from, I don't know quite exactly who, but the ones I really get it a lot from are people who say they're atheists. Yeah. And, you know, I just have to say that the God that a lot of atheists unbelieve in is really, really horrible. They unbelieve in this horrible, horrible God that William Blake would have called, so Blake is in this book a lot. This is a Blake book. If you're a literature scholar like me, you have to write a book about somebody every now and again, and I'm a huge, big fan of Blake. And I've been trying to write about Blake since my dissertation, but I've never been able to, because I love everything that he says. So the dissertation would just be like, check this next quote out, it's amazing. That's not really a dissertation. But this is, check this next quote out, it's amazing, right? Finally got to do it. It's not really so much about Blake, it's sort of with Blake, which is even more pretentious. That was going somewhere. It's all improvised from notes, so it may come back to me what my point was, but my main point is I wrote this book. It's got Blake in it. Blake invented this great term for this kind of God, whether you believe in this kind of God or unbelieve in this kind of God. He calls this God Nobo-Daddy. Yeah, Nobo-Daddy. It's like a combination of your daddy and nobody. And, you know, this kind of God is the kind of God that apparently the devil, according to Thomas Merton, wants you to believe in. A sort of God of no ambiguity, right, where right and wrong are definitely very different. True and false are definitely very different. This is not very scientific, yeah, because in a scientific age, true and false really sort of overlap. Yeah, in a scientific age, truth is what we call modal, right? There can be amounts of truth, right? Like the Pfizer vaccine is 95% effective, right? There isn't some pope saying, it is effective, damn it, and if you don't agree, we're going to torture you until you do agree, right? It's a fact that's arrived at by consensus, by the editors of Nature, whatever that is, that published the essay, or the Lancet, right? And, you know, Einstein is correct, but so is Newton. If you want a slingshot around the moon, Newton is still correct. He's just less true, right? So there can be amounts of true. So true and false overlap in a sciencey age, right? And so, you know, people who don't want any ambiguity don't like this age, really, but a lot of them are insisting on a kind of religion of science that isn't really science. It's what one might call scientism, right, which is wielding science as a kind of belief, yeah? And one reason why I wrote this book the way I did was that I just got fed up of people like me. I'm really sorry, I have to do another apology here. So all groups, oh dear, I'm going to say the wrong thing again. I get paid, so I often say that's why they pay me the medium-sized bucks, right? I get paid to say the wrong thing in public. That's what I think I get paid to do. And I usually say the wrong thing even when I'm trying to say the right thing. So I'm just going to say a thing now, and it doesn't refer to anybody in here because we're all transparent to our own emotions and we're totally in touch with ourselves and we're really integrated people. I'm talking about those fools out there who aren't listening to this crap, yeah? Groups are basically narcissists until you really work on them really, really hard. And I say this as a graduate of about 10 years of group psychoanalysis. Yeah, 25 years of psychoanalysis, one-on-one, 8 years, 10 years of that, which is really, really horrible because you're sitting in a room with other people and that's it. Yeah, there's no lecture. You're sort of sitting in a room with other people. Whoa! Groups are basically narcissistic. They have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. They're all about inclusion versus exclusion, right, unless you work on them really hard. You know, any group, a group of 2, a group of 4, 10 million, right? Any group could be that, I think. I'm with Freud on this, right? Group psychology and the ego, yeah? So groups tend to scapegoat people, right? They tend to put all the negative energy of the group into somebody and then they eject them from the group, right? And I'm that person for some reason. I volunteer for that job. You know, I write books from that position. I try to, even when I'm trying not to, I'm that way. For some reason, I'm like Donkey in Shrek, right? Like in any group, there's a kind of scapegoat wanted sign, you know, and I'm like, pick me, pick me. I'm sort of jumping up and down like Donkey in that scene of Shrek, right? No one's laughing at all. God. So, I get these angry faces and people saying, are you sure God is on your side? And stuff like that. And to which sometimes I answer them on the Facebook page. I've actually just said, no, I'm not. I'm not sure. Because I think somebody who at least professes to have this page called Christian Ecology should take some responsibility and say, actually, I don't know. I have a feeling of ambiguity, which to me is a sort of anti-fascist death ray component. It doesn't sound like very much, right? Ambiguity, irony also, right? Irony, ambiguity, and beauty are these three lovely phenomenological chemicals which, when put together, and Joanna, I would love it if you would do the password again, because I seem to have been locked out of this again, are actually great for resisting the kind of fascism that's on the rise all over the world today. And I'll try ever so hard to keep on touching the mouse, but it doesn't do that again. I do beg your pardon. Thank you very much. Are you sure God is on your side? And they either hate my ambiguity or they assume that I'm unambiguous, right? It's what seems to be going on there, right? When I teach literature for my job, right, partly, and I teach how to read a poem class, and in how to read a poem class, I usually tell them now, actually, what I'm really trying to do is try to encourage you how to not read the poem, right? How to hold off from reading the poem, right? QAnon knows what it means already, right? QAnon knows that I'm a paedophile lizard from space who drinks baby's blood, right? QAnon knows, right? I'm teaching people to not know, right? I'm teaching people to be like, is this actually just meaningless squiggles? Right, for as long as they possibly can, like narrative, like what's going to happen next? I don't know what's going to happen next. Is basically is part of narrative, and am I in a play? Is the basic format of a play, and is this just a bunch of squiggles? Is the point of any prosody? Yeah, and like I'm trying to teach people to tolerate that possibility that there might be meaningfulness, but there might not be meaning. Meaningfulness depends upon the possibility of meaninglessness. And I think in general we have plenty of meaning in life. There's plenty of meaning, right? Like I'm a PTSD guy. This book is a very much like a memoir book, and it's got a lot of stuff in it. I'm sort of coming out a little bit as someone with complex PTSD from my childhood, and after psychoanalysis, I went into like 3 years of EMDR therapy for the PTSD. And yeah, PTSD people don't want any ambiguity, It's all about survival, In a way, society, Western civilization, unquote, and in particular, white Western culture has had this kind of PTSD thing going on in its DNA forever, this sort of survival mode, And the PTSD people have plenty of meaning in their life, right? Friend, enemy, somewhere in the basement of me, there's like a little newspaper folded up. This just in, Timothy Morton is a piece of shit, right? That's the meaning, yeah? But what we need is meaningfulness. Meaning is always from the past, right? Like the meaning of a word is always determined by something in the past. Otherwise, it would just be like, blah, 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 just some kind of nonsense word, right? But meaningfulness is from the future. Yeah, and what we want is the possibility of the future. Surely, if we live in an ecological age where there's this big disaster happening all around us, we want to know deep in our hearts that the future can be different from the past. And that's what I think I'm teaching. That's what I think I'm writing about. That's what I think I'm doing. And I just got fed up of people like me, who get involved on the TV or off the TV. Usually they just yell at the TV, people like me. They just yell at the TV. But the whole point about the TV is not to yell at the TV, right? The whole point of the TV is to be on the TV. You shouldn't be yelling at the TV. You should be trying to get inside the TV and talk to people from inside the TV. But people like me spend all their time on X, whatever the fuck it's called, yelling at people and yelling at themselves and saying that you're evil, right? People like me. If you read the Guardian newspaper, there are some people called Eeyore. I call them Eeyore so that I don't implicate anybody. George Mondial! Who will tell you in the editorial section that you're a bad person, right? Like page 1 tells you some horrific factoid, right? Which is a fact, but you can't deal with it, right? It's like something out of the Book of Revelation, right? 20% of all life will be gone 10 years from now. Giant dragon emerges from ocean. Whoa, right? It's the book of Revelation, it's page 1, right? Then you turn to the editorial section, and Eeyore is saying, you're a bad person. You're a bad person. You're doing this wrong. You're evil. You're bad. Page 1, stupid. Middle of the newspaper, evil. Stupid, evil, stupid, evil. Did Martin Luther King, for 1 second, in the March on Washington, say, you guys have no idea how racist you are. You are so paralyzed with racism, you have no idea, you're never going to escape. He didn't, did he, right? Like he said, I have a dream. He opened up the possibility of the future, right, by saying, I have a dream. It's actually an amazing thing. There's a lot of stuff about it in the book, because not only is it like, he's won already by saying, I have a dream, because people are like, visualize, what dream? They're already dreaming. He doesn't even have to fill it in, right? He's already won. But also, think about this, and as he's an advanced pastoral minister person, he knows what he's doing here, right? Because, when do you hear people say, I have a dream? It's when your partner is just waking up, or they're going to sleep, like early morning, I had a dream. Right, they just slightly subtly whisper it to you, I'm having a dream. Or they're falling asleep, I'm having a dream. The intimacy of that, right, the ability to be vulnerable like that in front of millions of people. And so not only are you opening up the future, but you're modeling, I am the neighbor, I am your wife, husband, girlfriend, lover, person. I'm 2 millimeters away from your face. I'm having a dream. Wow. Right? That. Yeah. Just having a dream, which is your brain, just your brain being alive. It's just your brain being alive, isn't it, having a dream? Minimally alive, right? Like if the default art is called dance, then the default dance is called life, and it's a rather boring dance. Usually you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth and you go to work, and it's a form of dancing, right? It's very routinized, but it's a form of dancing. And the default life is called being asleep, right? And that includes your brain, and when your brain is asleep, it's just kind of dreaming. The right to be asleep, I think that's the life in Black Lives Matter, to be honest with you. A lot of this book is very much anti-racism, because I think, like, how, as was said very kindly by Meredith, like I'm all about this right now. Like, how we treat each other is how we treat the biosphere, right? So if we don't get that bit right, then there's no chance, right? Plus also, Me Too and Black Lives Matter and so on are the good kind of American export, right? Like planet-scale, massive movements that everybody can like jeans and funk and blues and everything, right? We make cool things out of broken European stuff. That's my theory. We've got the legacy of slavery here, but we can make cool things out of it, rather than looking back on it and saying that it was great. I think cool is from the future and great is from the past. Cool is the scissors, great is the paper. I created this charity called Cool America Foundation. We are all about teaching the American public about global warming. Our 3 educational materials are the word cool, the word America, and the idea of juxtaposing those words frequently in the media. Have you heard of us? Yeah. We haven't done anything yet. It's really lazy. But talking about it is it, really. I'm a romanticist, right? Always put the message in the framing device. You don't have to say it. I have a dream. The framing device is the message. People are, just kind of queuing up for this idea of the end of the world. Whether they be religious people or people who think or say that they aren't religious. And people like me are usually talking in religion mode on the TV, and guess what we're going to lose? Scientists, people, and journalists who quote science are really talking religion because they didn't take a humanities class with Professor Morton, who would have taught them something about the thing that Lacan calls subject position, right? Or less pretentiously, PR calls it the reason to buy, right? Because they want to make money, so they call it the reason to buy rather than the subject position, which is hard to understand, right? As William Burroughs says, you sell the junkie to the heroine. You don't sell the heroine to the junkie. You give somebody a reason to buy it. That's what you're really selling. No one gave me a reason to buy stopping global warming yet. Everybody just told me I was stupid and evil. No one made me think, wow, it's 6 in the morning. My alarm just went. Stopping global warming is the sexiest, most fantasticest thing I can possibly think of, because it's the biggest problem in the world, and it's the sexiest problem in the world. No one made me feel like that yet, and I'm one of those people, so it's my fault, right? Since I can only take responsibility for my world, myself, it must be something that I'm doing wrong. And what are people like me doing wrong? We're in a belief competition in the media. We're like, you have to replace your stupid belief with our clever belief, right? Again, I tend to sign up for the scapegoat position, right? And I'm talking in a university with a lot of very cool, lovely people about, you know, we're all being weirdly religious without knowing it unconsciously. Oh, my God. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're losing, right? We're losing. And we're losing for a terrible reason. I'm going to say another thing now, and you can just really hate me now. So I made friends with this guy called Adam McKay. You know Adam McKay? He made this film called Anchorman. It's very, very funny. And then he created an industry called Hyperobject Industries, like a Hollywood production company, after this book that I wrote, and to make movies about hyperobjects. And one of them was QAnon. You know, and he made this incredible thing about it. And then he decided to make Don't Look Up. You know, Don't Look Up? It's about a comet. It's coming to destroy the Earth. And as it were, the lamestream media aren't covering it, right? I'm so sorry, Adam. Joe Truck Driver from my town of Houston, Texas, or maybe Port Arthur, sort of to the east of there, knows that already, right? Again, Book of Revelation. Joe Truck Driver knows that there's a comet coming to destroy the Earth. Joe Truck Driver knows that the lamestream media aren't going to cover it, because they never do, because they laugh at Joe Truck Driver's stupid religion, right? And Adam McKay's basically, the movie is saying, I think, and you're going to be laughing on the other side of your face, Joe Truck Driver, when you find out the science was right. And that's revenge. You know, that's science, but it's not really science, it's scientism. It's like, my religion's better than yours, and you're really wrong, and you're going to be laughing on the other side of your face when you find out that Gaia was real, and it's revenge, and you're going to die. But Joe Truck Driver has the antidote to this, unfortunately, and this is I'd say terrible things in public, I'm so sorry. Joe Truck Driver has the antidote, and the stupidest version of this antidote, I'm so sorry, Adam. I do revenge talk, we do revenge talk in the academy, and Joe Truck Driver's got something, and I'm going to say this, it's better than what we do. It's better than what we do. And until we figure out that Joe Truck Driver's idea is better than what we do, and talk up a level to that, we're never going to talk to Joe Truck Driver. So we're never going to stop global warming. Ready? Oh dear. There's a comet coming to destroy the Earth, and the lamestream media isn't covering it, but Jesus loves me anyway. Right? Mercy is better than revenge. Mercy is better than revenge. Right? Until we figure that out, until we figure out that the stupidest, most jingoistic version of Jesus loves me anyway is better than a lot of this output that people like me are doing, right, then we're never going to, ever going to create a planet-scale mass movement that's going to stop this. Because Joe Truck Driver's got mercy and we've got revenge. And in the end, fundamentally, life is mercy. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. In fact, I'm going to skip over this slide, which is all sophisticated Hegelianism. I tend to be rather opposed to Hegel, but I do like this one idea of Hegel. I'm going to go straight to this other slide, which is the basic concept of the book, which I'm calling flipped Gnosticism. Yeah, flipped Gnosticism. So, you know, Gnosticism, it's like we're wonderful spiritual beings trapped in a universe of matter, right? Our problem is that our world was created by an idiot, you know, and evil is basically the material world, and we are spirits in the material world, and stink and get a royalty payment and blah, blah, blah. But I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's the opposite. I think we are beautiful, flawed, wonderful physical beings trapped in a universe of terrible, terrible ideas. Terrible ideas. You know? If anything, if you want to get religious about it, the physical universe is the silence. This is a Gnostic word, right? They call God the silence. You know, and Milton, who knew a thing or two, never send a poor boy on a scholarship to a really posh school where you teach them the operating system, right? They they sent Milton to St. Paul's School, which is also, I went to this school, and it was founded by humanists in the Renaissance, and they give you the operating system, the grammar of Latin and Greek, and then Hebrew in your final year. I didn't get the Hebrew, but they gave this poor boy this operating system. So, wow, I'm going to create stuff out of this, you know. And you know what the word, you know, the word of God, Gospel of John, the creation moment is basically silence. Yeah. This physical world, the most obvious thing about it is that God isn't here. Right? So where are you? Sort of nowhere. And in some kind of crazy, paranoid way, that's actually, from Milton's point of view, proof of God's existence. Because we are the mystery of God. The universe is the mysterious physicality. Right? Like any truth system contains an opaque part. Right? Like it's not just that there's a signifier and a signified, it's that within the structure of truth itself, there is an opacity, Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Yeah, there's a kind of silence in it, right? And this universe, this physical universe, is better than the horrible heaven-hell one, which is basically ideas. You know, ideas are demonic, right? Ideas are angelic, demonic. They fly around, they exist forever. All you have to do is retweet them. You know, they're all like that. But the physical world isn't that, right? The physical world is flawed and sort of fundamentally silent, right? The beauty of any work of art is that finally there's a kind of top level of absolute unspeakability about it. You know, I'm so a Derridian on this, yeah. People who are into this idea of the end of the world, whether they be Christians or anti-Christians or scientists or whatever, I'm calling them demonic angels, right? Demonic angels. Demonic angels. They know they're right, right? They know they're right, and they know that they're on the side of good. And Hegel argues, as in the previous slide, that basically, can I go to it? Let's see if I can actually go to the previous slide there. Hegel argues that knowing that you're good is what evil feels like. What it feels like to be evil is that you know that you're the goody. Yeah, the people who invaded the Capitol building on the 6th of January knew that they were the goody, right? But as we all know, if you're a good teacher, you feel like you're a bit of a crappy teacher. Please say yes. If you're a good parent, you feel like you're actually a bit of a crappy parent. Being a truly great country would be feeling like a bit of a shitty country, actually. And like realizing, oh, maybe, you know, slavery, we did that, right? Structural racism is that, look, this whiteness is the structural racism. Look, I'm white, right? You don't have to look any further than the color of my skin, yeah? It's not hard to understand it. And that's the demonic angel, as opposed to and that's the angelic demon, as opposed to the demonic angel, right? Angelic demon, right? Someone who thinks they might be terrible, might be a terrible person, right? They think they're a sinner, but they don't talk to themselves in that kind of heavy way. Like the ultimate way to say I am a sinner is actually very gentle, if you think about it. It should be the nicest, kindest, gentlest thing that you say to yourself, actually. Or you're not really saying it properly, I think. So, you know, the angelic demons want the end of the world, right? And the end of the world is closure. You know, we get to sort out who's the goody and who's the baddie, and closure is comfy, if you know what closure is, right? The feeling of the ending of a story. Why are James Bond films popular? Because they're so comfy. There's lots of shooting and killing, but the format has got this one-to-one real-time feeling where the narrative and the chronological sequence of events are totally in line with each other. So it's very soothing to watch it, believe me. As a PTSD person, I watch a lot of action movies because they're very soothing, right? Whereas hell is a drag, right? Hell is a drag. Hell, the basic format of hell is I'm being judged, right? Oh, what did I do? Let's go back a little bit. There. Sorry. The basic format of hell is I'm being judged, right? But what's so bad about that, right? What's so bad about knowing that you're in hell? Yeah, what's bad about it is you're actually trying to foreclose the end of the world feeling. That's what's really bad about it. But actually acknowledging that the bad thing already happened, right? We already screwed up the planet. We already emitted the carbon, right? We already did it. We've done it, you know? My daughter came in the kitchen a few years ago. This is the reason why I wrote this book. She came in the kitchen and said, "Daddy, we're in hell." Crying, she was crying. "Daddy, we're in hell." And you know, she been watching Reddit stuff about global warming, and she'd been watching a school shooting video on repeat. She's 19 years old, 17 years old. We're in hell. It's crying. And so you think to yourself, what am I going to do? You know, parent skills, what do I do? You know, so what nonsense, you shouldn't believe, no, that's wrong, right? So you've got to join your kid. So I said, okay, Claire, we're in hell. This is hell. This is hell, right? Kind of is, you know. And into the kitchen walks Oliver the cat, you know, and I'm like, Oliver, therefore, is also in hell. I heard myself saying, what are we going to do about Oliver? We still have to feed him. Even though we're in hell, we still have to take care of Oliver. I said, oh, yeah, book. Right, because this is Blake's point, right? It's like, we live in hell because we disparage and imprison and incarcerate and racialize and everything, transphobia, misogyny, etc., the body. Yeah, in the name of horrible, stupid ideas. So what we need is a marriage of heaven and hell. Yeah, who's getting married to who? Blake wrote this thing called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Right? Who's getting married? Ideas, thoughts, whatever that is, like religion, art, culture, is getting married to the physical world again, right? So that's the book that I wrote, right? And that's the reason why this book is what I'm calling flipped Gnosticism. You know, one of the worst ideas, of course, is the subject-object dualism. Yeah, it's one of the worst ones. It's a horrible, terrible idea. You know, the reason why it's a terrible idea is because master-slave is a really terrible idea. Any subject-object duality is a master-slave duality, right? The reason to not like subject-object is because you don't like master-slave, right? And I'm totally with my friend Denise on this. You know this, Denise Ferreira da Silva? She wrote this book called Towards a Global Idea of Race, which has very profoundly influenced me. We talked a lot on this thing called the long player. You can YouTube, see what the dialogue was like, right? And Denise's idea is that any subject-object duality at all is a master-slave duality. So we need to work away very hard at this subject-object duality, right? Mind versus body, active versus passive, reason versus emotion, all these things, right? And sort of like how do we do that, right? How do we do that? And you know, can there be a form of ecological awareness that interfaces with something like Christianity, or can there be a form of something like Christianity that actually interacts with something like biological, you know, science, right? And I'm sort of struggling to do that. It's a marriage of heaven and hell, sort of put these two things together, right? And I think, yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, you totally can, actually. And this book is kind of saying that, and this book is actually saying that, you know, in your body, right? This is like a book that's it's anti-scientism. It's anti sort of essentialism, right? But it's kind of using actual science and sort of talking about it in this slightly different way. You know, Blake wrote this beautiful poem called The Divine Image. Yeah. And the divine image is you know, in your body, you know, in your body already is this beautiful idea, you know. In your body is where the divine actually is, right? To mercy, pity, peace, and love will pray in their distress, and to these virtues of delight return their thankfulness. For mercy, pity, peace, and love is God our Father dear, and mercy, pity, peace, and love is man, his child, and care. And what he means is when someone's about to hit you, you beg for mercy, right? Oh, please, don't. When you see someone being, you know, murdered in the street, George Floyd, you say for pity's sake. You just say it, right? When you fall in love with somebody, oh my God, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, right? It just sort of happens. It's in your body. Yeah, this is sort of Feuerbach, right? Feuerbach basically says, God is love. You can reverse the sentence because is theoretically reversible. So you can say love is God. Yeah, and all the things about religion are actually all the things about being an embodied life form living in a biosphere. Everything about religion that's any good, right? All the demonic angel stuff is that stuff that's actually fighting that. So funnily enough, that like inside of religion space is something very, very, very special, which is a phenomenology of how to be a life form, actually. We can perhaps go into that in the Q&A, but Richard Dawkins isn't telling you what it's like to be alive, right? Actually, certain parts of religion are telling you, right? There's a VIP lounge in every religion, I claim, right? I study esoteric Buddhism. I've studied it for like 40 years, right? You follow all the rules and you be a good person and you get in the VIP lounge and somebody goes, all that stuff about a mostly angry being that's mostly trying to get rid of you, whatever it is, karma, or some white guy with a beard who mostly wants to hurt you, called Slavoj Žižek, or Jehovah, or whoever they're called, mostly wants to hurt you and get rid of you. All that stuff was just to keep people under control, and what we're really talking about here is you are that thing, or you are closely connected to this thing called the divine, and your job from now on is just to notice it. That's your job from now on. And so you do, right? You get given this meditation instruction. There's a very beautiful Christian medieval one called the Cloud of Unknowing. The actual instruction is in the title. It's just be a cloud of unknowing. Esoteric Buddhism, Dzogchen, they basically say meditate like a corpse. Just be alive, right? Alive. Just be default alive. Yeah? And you're doing this and you're like, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. And your teacher is going, that's it. Dup, 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 dup. Do not adjust your set, right? This funny feeling that you're having, this tantalizing funny feeling that you're not quite getting it, is it? And why? There's actually a very, very simple reason, which is a very sciencey reason, right? Marriage of heaven and hell. Nerve signals, whether you're a plant or a mongoose, any sentient system has this. They always arrive late relative to the thing that they're about, right? Like I say something and the sound happens in your brain later than me saying it by a few milliseconds, right? I don't know, I'm not a scientist, a few hundred milliseconds, I think, right? Like I touch this and then a few hundred milliseconds later, my brain's like, oh, you're touching this, yeah? So phenomenologically speaking, to use a sophisticated word, the biosphere, this thing here, this body, is the future, right? It's from the future. All your senses about it is from the past. Furthermore, your proprioception, which is your sense of self, your basic, nice, this one, divine image sense of self, right? Not some kind of ego or some kind of concept of Atman or whatever, but your basic sense of self is your proprioception. I'm here. It's basically a kind of, and this is basically neurology of the last few years, is a kind of upside down photocopy of your environment, right? Otherwise, worms will get stuck in the tunnels they're digging, right? So check it out. You've got this sense of your environment, which is always a little bit late relative to the real one, and then you've got this sense of self, which is just an inverted kind of silhouette of your environment, right? So that's later. Yeah, so now we have all the building blocks of religion, right? We've got this tantalizing actual physical world, and we've got this quality of being just out of phase with it, right? And we've also got this quality of like knowing that we are part of it, and yet we're not, and yet we are, which is the sort of the upside down photocopy thing, right? So very, very simple biological fact and very sort of esoteric religion. They're actually sort of the same thing. Right, and so like how to stop global warming, right? To come back to this, right? How to stop it? How to make sure that we like arrest all the directors of the oil corporations and put them in jail for something like war crimes? How do you know, right? How do you know what to do? because life is a beautiful accident, right? Life is actually saying something true about the universe, which is that the universe is a quantum theoretical universe. It's a beautiful accident, right? In a way, life is the mechanical universe having mercy on itself, right? This thing here was kind of the same as this baby version, but quite a lot of this thing here didn't change very much because the chemicals, quantum theoretical stuff happened, and this boundary was maintained, right? And so, in a way, life is like a slow-motion action replay of the universe. It's like, why am I hitting you? You know, that's the subatomic particle of mercy, right? Like, why? You ever been there? Like, you're in the middle of a fight, and you're like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? This is stupid. There's this kind of hesitation. You know, Ian calls it wondering in his lovely book about the phenomenology of a thing, what it's like to be a thing, right? There's this fundamental hesitation there. Thank you, Ian, for saying that. And that's like mercy, right? Life is the universe having mercy on itself, right? We don't live in a revenge universe. Fundamentally, we live in a mercy universe where the future can be different from the past. You can have quantum random numbers which are genuinely unpredictable by any algorithm, even if it runs for trillions of years longer than the time of the universe. Therefore, the future can be different from the past, which is something you need to know, right? And life works by random genetic mutation, which is random with respect to current need, right? So it's not about efficiency, it's not about teleology, it's not from the past, right? If Steve Jobs had designed these, they'd be pinpricks because they're much more efficient, right? And it works by symbiosis, which is random encounters between strangers, right? All that neighbor stuff in Islam, Judaism, and Christianity is basically symbiosis. And then it also works by sexual selection, which is completely nothing to do with sexual reproduction. Do you like peacock tails? Yeah, I rest my case, right? Like, you think liking peacock tails is only pertains to female peacocks? That's not how evolution works, right? Darwin said, whenever I imagine a peacock's tail, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Wanting to throw up is like too much pleasure or too little pleasure, right? Beauty is totally trans, and beauty goes all the way down in the biosphere, all the way down to like beetles, at least, right? And so the biosphere works by this totally trans-Kantian, totally open for no reason, no teleology, beauty, random genetic mutation, and random encounters, symbiosis. It's a beautiful accident, right? The only thing that this book does really is it takes the teleology out, you know, and also the metaphysics of presence out of religion, right? Like the white supremacy components, right? Like Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle, who came up with this idea that what a thing is for is what the thing is. Right, so Macedonians are for enslaving other people, who they call barbarians, and barbarians are for being enslaved by Macedonians. It's very convenient for Alexander the Great, right? So teleology is like public enemy number 2. Public enemy number 1, for me, which I won't go into, is the idea that existing means like flatlining, just be continuing and continuing, no matter what, right? You just want to sort of take those out, you know. Because the eventual result of this philosophy, which is implicitly built into human being social space since about 10,000 BCE, was settler colonialism, right, where people like the English took it seriously. Like, we're going to manifest this all around the world, and we're going to prove that we are the, you know, manifest destiny, right? And, you know, from a certain Christian point of view, that's the war against the Holy Spirit, right? Like, attacking other cultures that think that, you know, pencils are alive and trees are people because they are pagan is actually, from a certain point of view, the sin against the Holy Spirit. Yeah. And that, for me, is why to care enough to get up in the morning and think stopping global warming is the sexiest thing I could possibly imagine, because life is a beautiful accident, right? And no matter where you are, there is the divine. It's right there, as Jung says at the top of his house, you know, vocatus atque non vocatus Deus adoret. Whether you summon them or not, God will be there. Yeah. Whether or not you're thinking about it, you grew out of a biosphere, and it's right there, tantalizingly there, but phenomenologically it's the future. So you can never fully touch it, even though you are it. And this is a magical, wonderful fact about our world. And, you know, so then I started thinking about it and sort of like, you know, the whole idea of kind of, oh, sorry, very bad at this. There. You know, the idea that evil is a thing that you can get rid of is evil, right? Remember that bit? The demonic angel bit? Like, this is Time Bandits, right? This is a little kind of chunk of something in a microwave called evil. Little boy's like, don't touch it, it's concentrated evil, and you touch it, the parents explode. And there is evil in the shape of this sort of humoresque devil who's basically making people explode, right? And deliver us from evil. We say it if we think we're Christians, or you hear it and you think it's this terrible by rote kind of transactional thing that you hear people saying. You know, yada, 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 but deliver us from evil, blah, 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 blah. And it turns out, you know, never give a poor boy the operating system. That isn't what it means, right? Because evil in that sense is either a feminine noun, which means evil as a thing, as a kind of reified thing, like a lump of evil, or poneros, which is evil as a being, like the evil one. But what is actually said, apparently by Jesus, is poneru, which is the neuter noun, right? Which is using a noun as an adjective, right? It's like deliver us from blue, yeah? Deliver us from up, you know, deliver us from happy, deliver us from evil. It's an impossible thing to do, right? Because as an embodied being, there is this kind of original flawed quality, right? And so you're saying something incredibly powerful. If you're hearing or saying the phrase deliver us from evil, you're actually thinking or saying something amazingly powerful, right, that we don't often get taught. And then, you know, there's the whole concept of evangelism, which has just been totally and utterly corrupted and bastardized and kind of taken over by demonic angels, right? Angelos, the word angel, is basically about messaging, right? And demon is about influence, right? A daimon is being influence that you can't see, right? And kind of like, in a certain way, being a demonic angel means that you know you're good, you know you're so good, that all you have to do is hit retweet, right? You're, in the Hannah Arendt sense, you're just following orders. You don't even need to know what the message is, right? And the message is like a supremacy message, and all you have to do is hit retweet. This is the problem, right? That some people can't be convinced right now because they've decided just to be these retweet people, right? But funnily enough, that's actually not what evangelism actually is, because when you look up the verb, in any old Greek dictionary, it turns out it's a middle voice verb, evangelize. Euangelis desthai. You is good, angelos is news, right, gospel. Euangelis desthai, a middle voice verb. It doesn't have subject or object. It isn't about mastery or slavery, right? We don't think about this voice very much in English because we don't think we have one, right? But evangelizing is never you evangelize a person, right? It's actually more like a kind of Tourette's, you know? It's like a sort of spiritual Tourette's syndrome. You sort of can't help going, bleh, yeah? So it's just like a manifestation of kind of being alive, yeah? It's got more in common with just sort of like wailing the truth than saying something true to somebody. And while we're talking about life here, this word is very important, right? Thumos. I want to stop here because this is the life that I'm talking about. It's not bios as a concept, right? That's a Greek word that means the concept of life, as in biology, like is this thing alive or not alive? And it's not a juridical term like zoe, which means does this thing have a right to live or not? It just literally means the feeling of alive, right? It doesn't mean alive or dead or alive or not alive or whatever, or right to life or whatever. It means the pulsing, flickering, quivering quality of alive, right? Just alive, just boom, 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 boom. Like your brain just having a dream, just alive. Thumos, boom, 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 boom. It's a trochee, rhythmically speaking. It's a heartbeat, right? The word rhythm, we have trouble defining it for interesting reasons. But the actual word comes from the word rain, as in diarrhea, which means to flow, body fluids. And the thum comes from thumos, which means the pulse, pulsation. Rhythm is the pulsing of the body fluids, all by their little lonesome, right? Like a quantum theoretical things just vibrate all by themselves, right? And this is the kind of life that I want to kind of like land on here. And this is the sacredness for me. It's the fact that we live in a universe that is a beautiful accident that just kind of moves all by itself, right? That's sort of magical. And you know what I think in the end is that really the devil is just a really, really, really bad idea. Thank you. Honored to take a question, right? As you can tell, this is the first time I've really road tested this idea, so I'm very nervous about it. I feel very clumsy, and I'm sort of hoping that the clumsy and the nervous actually help rather than hinder. And so please ask anything, say anything you want, anything that comes to mind. Yeah. Yes.
Hi. This is so interesting. It seems as though, at least since you wrote hyperobjects, some of your thinking about the idea of a world and also the end of a world, several worlds, the world has changed a little bit.
Perhaps.
I was just wondering if you could.
I would love to talk to that. Right, so the subtitle of hyperobjects is Philosophy and Ecology After the End of the World, right? And part of that was a provocation to make people think, oh my God, it's after the end of the world? But what I really mean is it's the idea of world doesn't work. It doesn't function, right? And once we've gotten over this idea of world, what is there? Right, what can we do? How can we think? What can we think about? But also a little bit the relief of knowing that the bad thing already happened. I'm good in an emergency. Normal life is terrible. I'm a PTSD person. Talking to people about coffee in a coffee shop is a horribly traumatizing experience for me, but when my daughter crashed the car and totaled it the other day, it's completely calm. There was a fire in my house, it nearly burned the whole house down, it's totally calm, And the bad thing had already happened, you can relax, right? You're trying to ward off this thing called the end of the world, right? But if it's already happened, you can relax. And then furthermore, there never really was a world in the first place to end in that way, right? And so it's this, I'm in the same kind of thought space here. Right, like people who are trying to ward off the end of the world, or in some extreme cases, trying to bring it about. Right, like some people want the end of the world. This is the problem, right? They want the end of the world because then their guy's going to come back, and execute for their amusement all the bad guys. You've ever read this, the Left Behind series of Tim LaHaye? That's the idea, right? Like, why is the Republican Party so into Israel right now? It's because all the Jews must get into Israel to hasten the second coming of Christ. This is the bit they don't tell you, right? But it's from Tim LaHaye's Left Behind series. Then JC comes out of the sky with an Uzi, right? And all the Jews have to convert to Christianity at that point, because if they don't, they will be executed by Jesus. They don't say that bit out loud, but that's why they're so pro-Israel. It's very serious. This is serious. This is in people's head right now. It's Armageddon, and I'm getting out of here, And it's kind of like that weaponization of something that's really about mercy. I missed that bit in the crucifixion scene where Jesus winked at somebody and was like, "Don't worry, I'm coming back next time with a vengeance." This all means something. Don't worry, wink. I missed that bit. The whole thing was just ridiculous, meaningless suffering. To pure accidentality, and that's the good bit, right? That's the good aspect of it, right? So for me, the end of the world is the end of the idea that there is a world that could end in a funny way. Otherwise the phrase "world without end" doesn't make a lot of sense, And actually, in the end, it would be better to call it "worlds without ends." Because teleology is also a problem, right? The idea that things are going in a direction isn't really anything to do with the physical world at all. And it's just something some guy invented to justify invading some other country, And so I think I'm still there with the hyperobjects thing, but I can see why you have some puzzlement with it, right? Because now I've started talking all this kooky religion stuff, you know. But I have an app for that, and if you get this, so there's a sticker over there, right? And if you get this, it looks very scary, and it says hell, and there's this kind of pandemonium-like square that looks like the prison of hell, you know. But actually, it's a QR code that takes you to a YouTube video where I explain why the hell is Professor Morton talking this way now about stuff, right? So from my point of view, it's like a logical progression, right? But as usual, from everybody else's point of view, it's, oh my God, he's really gone off the deep end now, you know. So I appreciate what you said. Am I helping? Yeah, good, I think, good. Thank you. Hello, yes.
Hi, thank you, Rita, for a thought-provoking talk, and
It's a pleasure.
really interested in your thoughts about teleology, but also about our discomfort with ambiguity. So even if we can recognize this, what is there to do about it?
Right on. So one thing to tell yourself and other people is that ambiguity is an accuracy signal, right? When you hit the ambiguity in something, it means you're onto something. You should feel good when you feel ambiguous, right? Quick check. Who goes to the eye doctor? I've had LASIK, so, but yeah, obviously don't check it out. I have LASIK, but I now have long sight. Great, thanks a lot, LASIK. So you go to the optician or optometrist, and they say, is it number 1 or number 2? And it's obviously number 2. It's much more focus. And is it number 1 or number 2? They're constantly correcting this machine to get it more and more and more precise, right? And oh no, it's number 1 this time. And after about half an hour of those, you're down to this thing. Is it number 1 or number 2? Number 1 or number 2? I don't know. I don't know. And furthermore, I can't know because my money is finite and optometry is finite and the optometrist is finite and this time is finite and lens grinding is finite. And I think I'm down to the last 2 possible choices. This one is crappy in this way and this one is crappy in that way, but they'll both kind of do. You have a very precise choice there between 2 in this case, or in some instances 2 or more, completely correct on their own terms, interpretations, in this case of your eyes. What does it mean? You have an accurate prescription, right? Ambiguity is a very precise choice between 2 or more possible interpretations of a thing, right? When you can't decide between number 1 and number 2 or number 3, it means any of those will be correct, right? You can relax. Yeah, so ambiguity is a signal of accuracy. It's the complete opposite of vague fluffiness, actually. And so you can feel really good about that, you know. And so, quick fake news detector. It doesn't work in all cases, right? But is the news that I'm hearing insisting that it's totally and utterly true? It's probably fake news. And if it isn't, I should be thinking about it quite carefully. Is the news a little bit ambiguous? I'm not saying objective, like that journalistic objective standard, right? Some people say that global warming is a small snail called Gerald who jumps up and down on the surface of Venus. That's not what I'm saying here, right? I'm saying, you know, scientists say that Pfizer vaccine is 95% effective. It's ambiguous. It's not very ambiguous. 95 is, you ever play Dungeons and Dragons? It's very hard to roll 96 to 100 on a percentile dice. I just lost a lot of the audience there. But, you know, ambiguity is scientific accuracy, right? You can't get it to 100%. 100% is the Pope saying Coca-Cola Zero is better than Diet Coke, and if you don't agree, I'm going to torture you, right? Which is ironic because it is better than Diet Coke. That, which brings me on to my... I know, I've perjured myself, but I'm so sorry. Which brings me on to the topic of irony, right? Like, irony contains ambiguity because irony involves the feeling of something contradicting, right? Number 1 and number 2 are different from each other, but when they overlap sufficiently, it's ironic, right? So, like, low-level irony would be saying one thing and meaning another thing, like sarcasm or doublespeak, right? This is really bad, right? And you mean this is really good. And then higher level would be where the true and the false overlap completely, right? And this is what our world is like, because according to the way I like to see things, which is a sort of object-oriented, deconstructy way, things are exactly what they are, but never as they appear. The data is never the thing. Like if you measure a banana, you have a banana measurement. Right? If you bite a banana, you have a banana bite. If you lick a banana, you have a banana lick. If you write a poem about a banana, you have a banana poem. If you use a banana as an example of a thing called object withdrawal in a stupid lecture in St. Louis, you have a banana example. If the banana starts to talk and goes on a chat show and starts talking to Stephen Colbert, that's banana interview. The banana is now bananas, because even the banana doesn't know what the banana is. A banana goes into therapy. It's like, oh my God, I realized I was a banana when this guy used me as an example of object withdrawal in this stupid lecture in St. Louis. Now, whenever I hear words like object or Morton, I just get really triggered. Right? That's not the banana either. That's banana therapy session. Even the banana doesn't know. Even the banana can't access the banana. Right? So there's the banana, and there's the banana data. The banana data is never the banana, which is also Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, using bananas. Right? And so that's very ironic, because the banana data is about bananas. It's not about shoelaces, but it's never the banana, right? So reality itself is ironic. So irony is a reality signal. It's actually not this kind of cute escape from reality T-shirt slogan thing. That's not ironic enough in a way. That's a syndrome that Ian also, handy word Ian calls ironia. Right, where you're just trying to perform, I'm more ironic than you, which is very sort of unironic in a certain way, because you're trying to win, you know. It's a little bit like a more dangerous use of it in misogynistic or racist speech, where somebody says, I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? That's weaponized irony. It's not ironic enough, because there's a level where you're trying to be the winner. And in the end, there's no winner with irony. Irony is the clown-like quality of things, where they're never exactly as they seem. You know, irony is Socrates saying, I really am a clown. Iron means clown in Greek, right? I'm really not messing with your head. I'm really not trying to make your head explode. I'm not Columbo. I'm not going, I just have one more question to try to make your head explode. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it next to you, and I'm like, and you're going, oh my God, you're right, and I'm wrong, and I don't even know that. Right, and that's called philosophy, which, if you think about it, is two emotions. Right, never in the word philosophy do you see anything about ideas. You know, when I was younger, of course, like many 20-something people, I thought that philosophy was like having big ideas, and comparing the bigness of your idea to the bigness of other people's big ideas is a very boy 20-something thing to do. I don't know why. And then you get to a certain age and you realize actually it's about trying to not have ideas. Right, philosophy is the love of wisdom. You're driving the love car down the wisdom street, is how I see it. And the ideas are like the lampposts, and you don't want to point your car at the lamppost, you can get hit. Right, you just want to glide gently down the street, row, row, row your boat gently down the love philosophy street, you know, just to mix my metaphors and my stupid nursery rhymes for a minute, right? And so you can feel good about ambiguity, and you can actually, ambiguity is like a lot of things in the world, like mercy and pity and non-violence, they are in fact the most devastatingly powerful forces in the universe, but they don't look like it. You know, yelling and hitting people, you know, seems like the right thing to do. You know, it's like, I hit them to teach them a lesson, but you're not really teaching them a lesson, you're just hitting them. That's a breakdown in communication when you hit them, right? And, you know, non-violence, so I'm reading Gandhi on non-violence in order to get this book together, right? And Gandhi says, to be truly non-violent, check this out, I didn't know this. You have to be ready to kill people, otherwise it's cowardice, right? You have to be ready to actually kill the other person, and then you don't. You have mercy on them, and that's non-violence. Otherwise, it's just called being a coward. So yeah, this non-violence is actually the most devastatingly powerful thing ever, because you're interrupting the mechanism there. You know, you're stopping the revenge cycle from happening. You know, we live in a chemical universe of revenge, right? Like where this chemical eats that chemical, and this chemical turns that chemical into that chemical. Black holes are gonna black hole. They're just gonna do it, right? But life forms can refrain, because life refrains a little bit, just a little bit, right? Like in the end, mercy has mercy on itself, and life forms end up dying, you know. So in the end, even life just kind of doesn't really work, right? But life and furthermore sentience and thinking are always like a kind of malfunction. You know, you only really have to think when something goes wrong. You know, and so ambiguity, which is that really, is this guy really answering my question? You know, he's going on a bit. Is a precious, lovely phenomenological chemical which we should manufacture by the bucket load, you know, and it's one of the ultimate components of an anti-fascist laser, I think. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I think I want to ask a question that's a little bit intellectual, but also a little
Please.
personal, if that's okay?
Please.
You seem to have sort of given up on trusting the past as a resource that can lead us into the future. I think maybe that's too obvious to state, but it seems like there was a
No,
little bit
thank
of
you.
a polemic that meaning is in the past and we're looking for meaningfulness.
Yes.
So I was interested in that, in part because I care a little about the past.
Right on. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm also, at the same time, you emphasize that you suffer from PTSD, which is from the past, and which is a struggle that you seem to have.
Right on.
So how do you, can you talk about those two sides?
I would
the
love to
intellectual
talk about
side and the
those.
personal side?
Very much. I'm so glad. People always say that. I'm so glad you asked that question. But I really am so glad you asked that question because it's a crucial question because it has to do with our ideas about time, right? And we live in a universe of terrible ideas that hurt us. And one of the ideas is that time is not you, but time is a Wikipedia line, right? And here's the present, and there's the past, and there's the future. And first of all, how do we get from there to there? You know, it's like a big old philosophy problem. How do you get from there to there in a point-based space? You can't do it, actually. You know, it's a paradox. And, you know, so according to that model, I might be saying that forget the past, it's all wrong, right? But where else are you going to find the future but in the past? And what else are you doing as a scholar, or as anybody really, as somebody who's just a person trying to be a decent person, than trying to find some nicer way of being based on the resources that you have, which are the past, right? And when I say past, I don't mean something that's over there that I can point to. I mean this thing here, right? This thing here. You're looking at the past right now, right? Like when I was 19, I had this really bad acne. I was a poster boy for Accutane. I was one of the first people to use Accutane in the UK. It was really, really bad acne. And I can still see the scar tissue from that in my face. It's like my face is a map of everything that happened to my face. And when you look at a historical document, such as a poem or a letter, you're looking at a series of decisions made by any number of authors to put a word here or a word there, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. And the author could be a human being, the author could be the family of that person, the author could be capitalism, the author could be all of those things, the author could be the fact that there's a human, not a robot, right? There's many authors, right? And the past could be many moments, right? The poem was written in the 19th century, it was written in the time of humans on Earth, it was written in the 1810s, right? All these things are true and they sort of overlap, right? And that's the past. This is the past. The appearance of things is the past, right? And you're looking at the poem and you're like, I'm looking at stuff that I can discern from an archive and place according to the meaning and value of whatever in whatever model I'm using. You know, this phrase is from this and this phrase is from that and this is an allusion to that. And so you're looking at the past, right? But what does this poem mean? Who is this Professor Morton guy? What is a face? What the hell is a poem? That's the future, right? A thing, in a way, is a kind of junction between the past and the future where they overlap without touching each other in a kind of chiasmus. And you know how a chiasmus is? It looks like they're crossover, but when you look at it that way, they're not cross, right? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. The second one is more powerful, right? Because it's in the future. The first one becomes the past, and it's framed by that second one. So really they're not touching each other, but they look like they are, right? And to be a thing is to be this weird, magical, mysterious thing where you've got the banana is the future, Like, what the hell is a banana? You know, even the banana doesn't know. But the banana data, which is not just scientific measurements of the banana, but this banana reminds me of my grandma. You know, I don't like eating bananas. That's also data. That's the past, right? The Latin verb dare, the supine plural, is data, things that have been given, right? This is all data, right? The data is about things, and nerve signals from the thing called the biosphere are biosphere data, but they are the past. And phenomenologically, however, the biosphere as such is the future, right? But we're never going to find the future except for in the past, right? Like, go back to Martin Luther King and the power of someone going, I'm having a dream. I had a dream, right? That's in the past. You just heard it. They're saying it's something that just happened, right? But the way you receive it is to visualize something that you don't know yet, right? You don't know yet. Why is this person saying it? Are they saying it? Maybe they're still asleep. I don't know if they're really saying it to me. And what are they dreaming about, right? That's the future, like 2 millimeters away from you. You know, in a funny way, like, we're not alienated from the past, right? Like, the Garden of Eden isn't in the past. It's about 100 milliseconds into the future, in a way. It's just like it just happened. Or it's just about to happen in the future, right? We're not alienated from some past state. Look around you. Can you see any flaws in your world? Yes, there's this rubbish guy telling you stuff in front of you. Therefore, the past sucked, right? You don't need to go much further than that. If you can see any mistake, there's a funny little stain on the concrete there. Therefore, the past sucked. Are you a completely enlightened Buddha? No. So the past sucked, right? But where are you going to find the future except for in the past? The present is really just a construct designed for measuring purposes and other projects, right? Like, if you're an atom, then the present is probably like a femtosecond kind of a thing. And if you're the East India Company, then the present is like a 6 to 9 month thing involving credit instruments that allow you to go around the Cape of Good Hope and, like, colonize Indonesia or whatever you're doing, to sell the rice back to them at a huge markup, right? And so that's your present moment, right? So the present is really just this scalable tool, you know, and if as a deconstruction influenced person I'm trying to go up against the metaphysics of presence, then I have to also say the present as such is a spurious concept, right? And what we're really dealing with in this world is overlaps between the past and the future, right? And kind of the possibility that things could be the future is kind of the thing to preserve here. Right, there's always more meaningfulness in the world than the meaning. You know, there's always the possibility of because it's all made out of nonsense. You know, fundamentally, it doesn't make any sense. Right, and you know, a lot of activists forget this, often because they're very young, and because they want to mean something. Right, but when Anna and Phoebe, who are my friends now, chucked a can of soup at a Mona Lisa, at a Van Gogh painting. Right, you know, right? You remember the soup thing? Right, you remember it. Unlike when my dad was in Greenpeace and would stop a whaling vessel, right? Because that's only got 1 degree of symbolic freedom. You know what that means already, right? Then you have to do it again, then you have to do it again, then you have to do it again. Environmental action is so primitive and boring. But when Anna and Phoebe chucked the can of soup, it's like, wow. Finally, environmentalism had its Sex Pistols moment, because even Professor Morton, and they said they got it from the Professor Morton How to Do Activism playbook, and even I didn't understand it. So what the hell did they just do? Until 2 days later I realized, oh, what the hell did they just do was what they were doing, right? When the Sex Pistols went on TV, in the commercial break, Bill Grundy, the presenter, sexually assaulted Susie Sue. And so when they came back, Grundy said, say something rude. And they said, quite meaningfully, you dirty fucker. Because it was like a Me Too moment before its time, actually. But nobody knew that watching the TV. They're like, wait, what the hell are they doing on TV, right? 5 minutes later, the Sex Pistols were everywhere. You know, environmentalism needs a little bit more of that, a little bit more of, oh, what the hell is that? You know, a little bit more future, and less obvious, ponderous meaningfulness, because in the end, whoever controls the nonsense controls the world, as Putin knows, but also as Pussy Riot knows, right? Like, what's the band that's scary to Putin is Pussy Riot, because they're also trying to be in charge of the nonsense, right? Like, the most scary band to the totalitarians in the 70s in Czechoslovakia was not the agit pop political band, right? They were tolerated by the Stalinists in Czechoslovakia. The scary one was a psychedelic one called Plastic People of the Universe, because they were doing nonsense live on stage, and whoever controls the nonsense controls the world. As any fascist will tell you, everyone's going, oh, that's just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, that's just the electoral college vote, that's just a meaningless ceremony. That's when the fascists strike, because they know that whoever controls the nonsense controls the world, and soon you have to do their nonsense, which is goose-stepping and not denigrating Donald Trump. And suddenly, you're in their world, because they control the nonsense, right? And when is environmentalism going to start controlling the nonsense? Right now, because I've just done a nonsense talk and a nonsense Q&A. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Frank Zappa would be a good example of what you're talking about.
Yes.
Performing that.
For real, Frank Zappa, right? I was just listening, funnily enough, for the first time in years to Edgar Varèse's Arcana this morning. And Zappa was a huge fan of Varèse, and he wrote Varèse a fan letter, actually. And one of the interesting things about Arcana is that it's a very nonsensical piece of modern music, right? It's not serialism. It's not like a rules-based, algorithmical music. It's just any sound at all, yeah. But that kind of stuff got kind of lost in the kind of fetishizing the Russian Revolution formalism type avant-garde art thing, that kind of weird theosophical, esoteric, spiritual, symbolic, all that's just bourgeois crap, you see. But I'm an alpha plus theory student. I know how to talk. I can do formalism, I can do Gramsci, I can do Bach, I can do all that stuff. But over time I've realized that actually what was missing was, number one, where's the aestheticism? Where's the late 19th century aestheticism? Because those guys were all about expanding pleasure. That sounds like a good idea. Like William Blake says, the future will be brought about by an increase in sensual enjoyment, right? Well, dolphin pleasure is us appreciating and trying to enhance dolphin pleasure is an increase in sensual enjoyment, and that's ecological politics, right? But also just the sheer nonsensicalness of being into like sort of art for art's sake, that it doesn't sound like anything, it just sounds like rubbish, right? But I reiterate, the most dangerous band was the psychedelic one, right? And they were sort of onto something here, and in the end, finally, fundamentally, at least for me, this is a nonsensical universe, right, that doesn't have a direction to it, that doesn't have an arrow to it, that doesn't have a point to it, that doesn't fundamentally have a meaning, but it is throbbing, thrumming, quivering with meaningfulness, the possibility that it might, right, the future, yeah, because that's where all the, whatever that is, Buddha nature, the divine, whatever you want to call it, the utopia, whatever you want to call it, hyperspace, the Kalunga, whatever you want to call it, is that aspect of the world, yeah. And I would do anything to orientate ecological art and politics towards that, rather than to the temptation to scream. I understand it, right? The temptation to yell, the temptation to be like, don't you realize you're screwing up the world? But when you're trying to tell your mum that her brother just died, you don't do that to your mum, right? That's what you don't do, right? So we're kind of stuck in this wash cycle where we're not ready to accept the burden, in a way, of nonsense, right? And the top level of that is called grief, right? Grief is just this emotional nonsense that happens to you for no reason, yeah? And white Western people do anything to ward it off. And one of the main influences on all of my work is a Dogara shaman called Sobonfu Some, who I've never properly acknowledged. So this book is an apologetic, explicit acknowledgement of her influence on my life, because my best friend Carlyle was a hospice chaplain who was also her assistant, and she would come around my house in Northern California for dinner, you know, and she's the Dagara people, they're all about grief. Burkina Faso, yeah, you want to get married, you have a grief ritual, yeah, you have a dispute with your brother, you have a grief ritual. You want to put a new window on your house, you have a grief ritual. These guys are so busy having grief rituals, they don't have time to take over the world, you know. And a lot of our life is like, if only we could grieve thoroughly. I'm not going to say properly, because you can't grieve properly, for all the nasty, horrible PTSD things that we've done, like the legacy of slavery. Everyone's got some kind of PTSD from that, you know. And grief is a very strange thing, because to go back to your point, so I only learned how to grieve a few years ago, so I'm very new at it, yeah. Mostly because I have a lot of things to grieve. When Sabonfu would ask me, like, how are you doing? I could feel it coming up in me, because she's like a grief ritual specialist. So she does, so what do you do for a living? Run away quickly. And I gradually realized this is the best thing in the world, because you know what grief is? Grief is the inner body worker. Grief is your past trying to give your future a massage, right? It happened to me in this hotel room in Denmark. Grief showed up and said, hey, I know this sounds really stupid. It was 2020, January 2020. This is going to sound really stupid, Tim. Lie on the bed in the fetal position, and I'm going to massage your abs, right? And you're going to throw up, and you're going to cry, and you're probably even going to laugh, and it's going to be horrible and wonderful. And then I'm going to leave you, and then I'm going to come back at some unspecified time because you let me in now. And grief is, thank goodness, there's at least one emotion, affect, feeling, feel, whatever that word is, that you can't get on top of, that refutes the subject-object, mind-body duality, right? Grief is that, right? It's your whole life, you know? And panic is kind of the antechamber of grief. And I feel like, to go back to your question, end of the world stuff is in the key of panic, right? End of the world stuff is like, I'm not going in there, I'm not going into the grief room, you know, whereas hell is like, oh, I'm in the grief room, fuck, you know, that's better. Grief is better than panic, but panic thinks it's better than grief. Anything but grief. I'd rather tear myself to shreds or tear the world to shreds than grieve, right? But grief is how, you know, the grief is everything that happened to you lubricating your future so that the future can be different, right? That's the beauty of the past, right? We discover the future in the past, and all the stuff we do as scholars is really a kind of grief work where we're lubricating it so that the future can be different, right? And so by no means am I saying to forget the past. I'm actually saying look the past very, very, very carefully, because that's where you find the future. But in many cases, only when you can go through a grief process sufficient to let that future be like to lubricate all the ideas that you've got so the future can go bleh inside of you. Thank you.